I am pleased to introduce our moderator this evening, the principal of North Raven Consulting and co-host of Porcupine Podcast, Michael Miltenberger. Thank you, Michael, for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Pleasure to be here. I am joining you from the banks of the Slave River in the Northwest Territories in a town called Fort Smith. And I would like to thank the Walrus for the opportunity to moderate this event this evening, especially after such compelling comments from our speakers this evening. I'd like to thank Chantal, Ran, Anna Kay, and Sophia. I know there are many questions that I have, and I'm sure the audience does too. I'm going to start the question and answer period, and to submit a question, you can ask it in the Zoom chat box, and I'd also like the speakers now to join me on the screen. I'd also, as they join me, I'd also like to ask my own brief question of the panelists just to start the question and answer period. And I can just start in the order that they presented. That question very quickly is, what is the key factor that got you into the work that you're doing today out of all the many areas that you could have addressed yourself to? So we'll start with Chantal.
I think it really came from a journey, starting with environmental sciences and just having, I guess, this instinct or knowledge that, the planet we live on isn't ours to take and to benefit from, and really about a very humanistic view that, we're here as stewards and, we need to be able to, and, it's not about a take model. And we're really just visitors. And, so from the environmental and sustainability field, and then it just evolved to the circular economy. I mean, it's all part of the same conversation, but I think that's my evolution.
Thank you. Ran, what would you like to add to that from your own point of view?
So I came at this from a very different angle than most. I used to be a hedge fund lawyer before starting Fresh City. And I started learning about food and all the impacts that our food system has on the world writ large. And honestly, a lot of it is just, it was hard for me to forsake addressing one issue like climate change, and then not being able to address an issue like, labor rights or human rights. So for me, food tackled all of these important issues, and I wanted to tackle that. And I think the concept of the circular economy kind of brings it all together, and being in farming, puts you very close to the rhythm of, where we could be as a society if we did listen to nature more and worked with it instead of against it.
Thank you. I must say that you're the first urban farmer that I've ever met. So it's a pleasure. Anna Kay, what would you like to say?
Thanks for the question, Michael. I started out studying environment and health studies and environmental policy, similar to what I had said in my talk, looking to get into the environmental sector in order to make a really strong impact on the movement. But similar to what Rand said, there were so many different causes and issues at play that it was hard for me to choose which one. And I really felt that at the community level is really where you can make that close impact. And Wood Green Community Services was just calling me in terms of being at that community level to really make an impact. But, a voice has continued to be in my head, even though I don't directly work on environment and sustainability, that it's such a huge issue that no matter what we do at Wood Green, we need to solve this issue first. And so that continues to intersect in everything that I do, and really proud to be, again, at that community level where I think the impact is strongest.
I agree with you. Sophia.
Great question, Michael. I would say for myself, I really realized when I was in the audience at the UN event that the way we talk about fashion and circular fashion is so focused on the environmental and emissions reduction side. However, most of the companies that are up there talking about their ESG reporting and how they're reducing the climate emissions are the exact perpetrators of being the largest greenhouse gas emitters in the fashion industry. So I really thought, this is not you really doing that good of a job. It's you, spilling milk and then saying, I'm going to clean it up. Look at me. For literally doing the bare minimum. And the human dimensions in the fashion industry, I felt it was not nearly talked about enough, especially because most of the reason we're in this mess is because of really, really gross and greedy consumption patterns in the global north, that we're just really having a global race to the bottom for the global south to see how much more we can extract. And so I thought, there is not currently a youth organization working on a circular fashion from an intersectional lens, and there's also not, there's some that talk about a lot of things in a really, really great way, but it needs to be one that really brings these perspectives together. And so from, meeting other young people from around the world, from my experience in forestry and natural resource conservation, I decided to go the nonprofit route, and here I am. And we're also using the circular economy as a solution to some of our work. So really happy to be here today and to answer these questions.
All right. Very interesting first answers. So we have a question from a young engineer who is asking, what is a technology, design method, or challenge that I could tackle to contribute to the sustainability revolution? And Sophia, we'll just work back from you. We'll ask you to answer that first, if you'd want to just take a quick response.
Definitely, it's a great question. And from experience working with diverse young people, it's really important that we have very interdisciplinary solutions. There were many times where I saw design challenges where, they're asking for a technical route, a communicative route, but really we have to have an intersectional one. I think a design challenge to sustainability is definitely one where we can look into how to use compostable food waste as material to make clothing. There's currently some companies are currently doing that, but lots of companies such as H&M have talked about how they're trying to recycle clothing. And while that's a great feat, there is definitely a lost opportunity if we're not seeing how we can kind of nip the butt at the source to see how we can just have more circular materials in the first place. For the recycling materials is taking much, much longer compared to how fast clothing is being produced. So I think a great design challenge is we look into what other innovative biomaterials can we use to properly dispose of clothing, to recycle clothing, and to make clothing in the first place. That's what I would suggest.
Thank you for that brief response. Ryan.
I think there's a lot, but let me just focus on one because I'm obsessed with it personally. Better installation materials. So whether it's our reefer trucks traveling through, the country or doing deliveries, or our building envelopes, or what we deliver in, I'm convinced there's a better way to insulate whether it's packages or buildings, and we haven't kind of focused enough on it. So that's a personal kind of pet peeve of mine.
Thank you. Good answer. Insulation in Canada is a big deal. Anna Kay.
So I'll try to answer this from the social service agency perspective. When I think of technology, one really interesting thing that What Green is trying to do right now is trying to apply data collection in a way that really allows us to understand the impact that our programming is having and be able to prove where the gaps are and where we can put a little bit more effort in order to have the impact that we want. And in thinking about inserting the circular economy and nonprofits into the circular economy, social service agencies into the circular economy, I think having really innovative data collection in which we can show how the social programs that we offer tie to the impact of sustainability and the circular economy, that could be a really great opportunity for technology to support nonprofits in entering this space.
Good response. Okay, Chantel, looking to your comments.
Hi, thank you. So I'm going to take a bit of a side door for this one, and I'm just going to say that there are a lot of technical challenges that can be addressed to improve the circular economy and to make our systems more circular. I would just say that we need to be careful that when we're thinking about technology, we're really using it to solve a problem that we have identified that will improve our circularity, and that we're not looking at from the what's the technological opportunity here, and then how can we use it, and then how can we say that it improves circularity, and just make sure that we're really using technology for a positive net gain, so that we've kind of looked upstream, and then when we come to a certain point, we say, okay, the obstacle here is really technological, and then how can we do it? And there are definitely instances where we need new technology to be able to improve these systems, but we just need to make sure that we're coming at it, looking at the upstream problem, looking at different solutions, and making sure that we're looking at a complete solution and not just looking at the, you know, technological obstacles, although there are some for sure.
Thank you. We also have a quick shout out from one of the audience to Fresh City Farms, where Tiffany Tran says she goes every other day. So there's a good bit of advertising for you. I'd also now like to quickly ask a question that I think that everybody'd be interested in weighing in on. It involves economists and politicians, and it's from Victor Martinez, who thanks you for your inspiring stories and wants to know your opinion on how the circular economy can change the idea of perennial growth, especially among economists and politicians. Do you think a steady state of economics is possible? Ran, I'll start with you.
Wow, that's a big one for just run a small business here. I think it is. I mean, it's to me, you know, it all goes back to how are we measuring economic growth, and I think, you know, at the risk of beating a dead horse, I think insofar as this audience is concerned, I think this idea of per capita GDP as a measure of how well we're doing as a society has to go out the door. We need a much more holistic measure, the way that a place like Bhutan has, for what it means. Because I can tell you, like, there's so many things that, you know, we do as a business that you know, might from the outside look like growth, you know, and more jobs, and we're producing more things. But net, it could be producing a net negative effect on society, certainly from an environmental perspective and in terms of what we're feeding people. So I think we can, but it is going to take, I think, a level of courage and bravery that I have not seen from mainstream politicians so far.
Thank you, Ran. Anna Kay, what would your thoughts be on this one?
Yeah, I would say that it's you know, looking again, as I was saying in my talk, at the future of a circular economy in Canada. It's very hard for me to picture, again, what that would look like for clients of Wood Green. Homeless people dealing with homelessness, people who are coming out of severe drug addictions, people who are new to the country and trying to enter the labor market. You know, and so when I think about the economy the way how it is, I think that things will need to shift, and it can't remain as it is in order to really achieve that vision that I think that we all have. And so, you know, really tagging on the inclusive to the green economic recovery is a really important aspect to these discussions that we're having, really making sure that an inclusive lens is tagged onto it. Because I think as soon as we forget what the experiences of a particular community or set of people will be like in this future that we're envisioning, we won't necessarily get there.
Thank you for that answer. The issue of there should be no losers when we move to a circular economy, I think resonates from coast to coast to coast. Sophia, could I ask you for your quick thoughts on this pretty broad question?
Yeah, definitely. Great question. Hard question. I'm going to speak from the perspective of clothing and fashion. I think the average Canadian probably has 50 articles of clothing, maybe even more, including shoes, socks, etc. If you multiply that by the amount of people in the world and just think about how much clothing we already possess, think about how much clothing is in storefronts, how much have yet to be produced, how much people are designing, and how much clothes is in the landfill. When it comes to fashion and clothing and apparel, we don't need more. We really don't need more. I really do think that we need to be thinking about degrowth, thinking about how to actually make use of what we already have, and really riddle this belief that in order to be a good person or be better, we need to consume more. And from being at the World Circular Economic Forum today, I heard really great inclinations of behavior change, individual change, but also it's important to think about demanding systemic change. So I think ahead of the federal election, it's important to look at these different politicians' policies on the municipal, provincial, and federal level and see, is there APR policy that's going to be possible? Are people talking about degrowth, and what is economic prosperity to them in terms of materials? Because it has to be circular, at least in the fashion sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Chantel.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I would say, from an economist perspective, we are seeing economists, changing. I mean, we have Kate Raworth from, Donut Economics, We know that we need to look at something else in the GDP, for example, that Rand mentioned. But we're in a situation where, and we also have somebody like Yikami who came on, earlier and talking about we need to change the way that we're doing businesses and what indicators we're using. But it's difficult. So I think we're in a situation where we know that we're not, we need to change our indicators, and we need to make that shift, and we know it needs to be more inclusive, and some of them more qualitative, but indeed, making that change and adopting it in all of our businesses is a real challenge.
Thank you. So keeping with challenges, one of the questions that Ju asks is, globalization dead? If yes, what happens to all the exports of food from developing countries? And can you please explain your position from an economic perspective as well as an environmental perspective? So this is really going to challenge your abilities to summarize and focus about a very big global issue. So Chantal, let you kick this one off for us.
Yeah, thanks for starting me off with a hard question. I don't think that globalization is dead. I think that whatever we're doing going forward, it's really, I think one thing that we've learned is that nothing is about throwing whatever we have away and just starting anew and hoping that whatever we come up with is going to be, beautiful and green and perfect. So, globalization, we got there. It's not perfect, and we're seeing a lot of impacts from it and things that we want to change. But I don't think that we should be throwing away the baby with the bathwater. We need to look at what do we have, what didn't work, what did we learn, and what can we do? And definitely, I don't think globalization is dead, and it's not dead yet. But yes, we do need to create local communities and help our neighbors. At the same time, I don't think that we're not starting at zero. And even if we came up with a new system today, it wouldn't be perfect. So it's really about, taking off where we are now, seeing where we need to change and what needs to change and improve it. So, we're improving as we're going, but I don't think globalization is dead, no.
Thank you, Chantal. We'll see what your colleagues say. Rand, what do you think?
I don't have much to add on what Chantal said. I don't think, as a matter of fact, I don't think it is dead. And I think as a matter of what's going to happen, I don't think it's going to be dead. I do think, I will say for myself, certainly from the part of the world that I kind of focus on, which is food, I hope it's not dead, because different countries can grow and produce foods better or worse from an environmental perspective. So for example, some crops just don't grow in Canada, like bananas. And even some things that we do grow here or are grown here, like beef, for example, can be grown or reared much more environmentally friendly in another country, such as, say, New Zealand during the winter. So I think I wouldn't say it's dead, nor that it should be dead, but that we should be thinking much more carefully about what we're importing and exporting.
Okay. Thank you. Anna Kay?
Yeah, this is definitely a tough question. And piggybacking off of Chantal and Rand a bit, I also agree that I don't think globalization is dead, nor do I think it ever will be. I feel like we're a bit too past the breaking point to go back, so to speak. But I think, touching on a question from a panelist earlier about how tech and technology can be integrated in the circular economy transition. I think that's where we can apply that lens of the benefits and positives of technology and how it can make our processes more circular. Looking at how we can make the transportation system more circular, reducing the level of pollution that comes from the transportation sector, as well as container packaging, et cetera. I think, that's the whole point of the circular economy, and looking at those different layers of production as well as consumption, both at reduction, but also integrating the circular processes from the start as well as at the end.
Thank you, Anna Kay. Sophia?
Yeah, tough question. I would have to agree with all the other panelists. I would say, if anything, COVID-19 has really highlighted just how globalized our world really is, and seeing a lot of the huge companies in fashion have to halt some of production when China was hit really badly in February and January 2020. However, I think when we did our youth survey, 36% of youth said that they do think more localized production chain and also more localized economies of scale, and also a strong emphasis on small to medium enterprises is really important to help take us out of the current corrupt and very extractive fashion ecosystem. So even though globalization is not dead, we see an increased amount of effort in localized economies, which I think is a really good solution that we should keep pushing forward.
Thank you. So I want to ask now, combine a couple questions tied into the election. So the questions that I want to combine are, have any of the panelists heard the word circular economy spoken in the current election campaign? I haven't, but I'm not listening about that closely. And how can we engage politicians at all levels to broaden their support for the circular economy? So we'll let Chantel start.
Yeah, I don't know if you know the politicians are talking about it, but I mean, there are politicians that are talking about circular economy in some of their web platforms. So, you know, that's one thing. Now, are they actually mentioning it when they're, you know, doing their talks and different representations? You know, maybe not. And, you know, what can we do? Well, we are in a democratic country. So one thing we can do is we ourselves as citizens, you know, we can bring it to our different representatives and ask them, you know, what is their position and what are they doing? And also, if you're interested, Smart Prosperity Report, I think they put a comparison of the different parties, the federal parties, and the different platforms on climate change. So that's one thing that somebody can look at. But specifically to circular economy, I mean, I think we're talking a lot about circular economy right now. It's in some of the strategies of our different levels of government. So, you know, it's up to us to just kind of, you know, us and everyone, to make sure that we're using this momentum to keep the conversation going and, you know, really instilling it to make sure that it stays and it doesn't just become another, you know, greenwashing or another green word, and that we're actually, you know, using this momentum to get change done and implementing it and getting it really grounded in what we're doing.
All right, Anna Kay, what do you think?
Yeah, so I haven't seen any language coming from the elections, at least, you know, the debates I've been watching, and I spend way too much time on Twitter and I haven't seen anything there either. But I would say that politicians are very responsive to their constituents, and similar to what Chantel said, you know, it's up to us in a way to speak out and ensure that this is on their radar, that this is incorporated strongly into their platforms. But I will say, you know, coming from my position, working at Wood Green Community Services, I didn't really know much about the circular economy. I've only learned, you know, quite a bit more over the past couple of months. And even just thinking about the term circular economy itself, I think if you grab someone off the street and ask them, what is a circular economy? Tell me about it. I'm not sure how many people would be able to actually confidently speak to what it is. And so, you know, in terms of whether it's been mentioned or if it's, you know, a top priority for politicians, it definitely should be. But one question that I guess I would just put out there is, how can we ensure that the language around the circular economy and the concept of the circular economy is accessible to enough people where it really does build that pressure and momentum to advance the movement? You know, I think that what you see and hear from politicians is what they're hearing. And so it's making me wonder if maybe one way that, you know, they can hear more about circular economy is through the language being more accessible for constituents to put pressure on them to speak more about it.
A good question. Rand, what do you think?
If by circular economy, we also mean an economy that works for everybody, and I think that it is a part of it. Certainly when it comes to food, I have not seen anything close to the focus that there should be on food insecurity. You have 4 million people in this country, most of them who are racialized, Indigenous folks who don't have secure access to healthy food. And I think that's not really made it to the top 10 issues in our debate. And that's, if you look at the kind of Maslow, you know, hierarchy of needs, we're not meeting those basic needs for a good chunk of our population in one of the richest nations in the world. So in my perspective, certainly the answer is a resounding no. But I would agree with Anna-Kay that it's up to us to urge our politicians to start paying more attention to these issues. And that's a big question for us as a company, frankly, is how do we turn consumers into citizens? So it's one thing to buy organic and local. That's going to solve, some of the problem, but ultimately it's a much bigger problem that requires political action.
All right. Very interesting response. Sophia.
For me, I agree with what my colleagues have said previously. I was fortunate to come across a report by the Smart Prosperity Institute recently, and I saw that Conservative Party, Liberals, and NDP all do have a stance on circular economy, but it's a strong emphasis on the Canada plastic economy for straws, grocery bags, and other things that within the plastics category. And I think this is really also what happened in the province of British Columbia, where we tend to be very one issue focused. When plastic straws were banned and everyone was using compostable straws, everyone thought that was so interesting, but that seemed to be the main focus was just plastics. This is happening federally as well. What about textiles? What about food? Some of the platforms have e-waste, but what about all the other things that we also have to recycle or have to try to see how to become more circular? So as a young person who is voting election now for the second time, I would be really interested and curious, and I have been speaking with my fellow young people about how we can push for more circular transitions with various different organizations, include Youth for Nature, Student Energy, and more. So I think it's very important for us to come together and realize that there needs to be this broader conversation, and it starts from a local level to provincial to federal. And I hope we can push for that more in the future.
I'd like to just quickly ask another question to tie it into this overall discussion. Laws govern regulations and policies at every level, at federal level, provincial level, municipal level. And in your businesses that you do, the work that you do, are there any current laws in Canada at any level that you think are major hindrances in developing a localized economy and the circular economy? If you had to identify one or two, but given the wide range of your work experience and things that you're doing. So we'll start with Anna-Kay.
I can't think of any laws or policies that are hindering the ability for a social service agency like Wood Green to be further engaged in the transition to a circular economy. But I would say that in terms of what policies could be implemented or further implemented is definitely policies and government investments around engaging the social sector and nonprofit organizations like Wood Green in the circular transition. Going back to what I had said on my talk, organizations like ours, we're not at the forefront of the sustainability movement or the circular economy movement, but we do have a role to play. And if there's anything that I would want to leave with the audience today, it's that each and every one of you has a role in this transition. And so, how can government ensure that the decision-making table incorporates a variety of sides of the conversation and a variety of aspects that are implicated and integral in meeting our vision, ensure that they're at that table. I think the more we see policies like that happening, the more that we can ensure that we actually meet that vision and meet our goals for 2030.
All right. So unfortunately, we're going to have to call it a night because we are at the end of our time. So I'd like to thank the panelists and I'd turn it back to Jennifer, but thank you all very much. I wish we had more time.
Thank you, Michael. I'd also like to thank again our speakers and everyone who has joined us tonight for this important conversation. Also, building off of one of the last questions, a reminder to get out and vote, Canada. If you're attending more of the World Circular Economy Forum, make sure to check out the launch of Threading Change's Global Innovation Story Map. This is a research and visualization project that will share stories and best practices for a sustainable fashion industry. You can catch it this Thursday, September 16th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Go to threadingchange.org where you can sign up. And if you enjoyed tonight's The Walrus Talks at Home, there's more. Also on Thursday, we've partnered with RBC to present the Walrus Leadership Forum, The Great Skill Shift. It's about preparing Indigenous youth for a digital future. And on Thursday, September 23rd, we're partnering with Facebook Canada to present the Walrus Talks at Home news and platforms. You can check in with us at thewalrus.ca/events to see our schedule, register for events. We also post videos from all of our talks, including tonight, and you can find them in the Walrus Talks video room online at our website. Do keep an eye on your inbox. This is the best way to stay in touch with us. You're going to receive a follow-up email and you can subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss out on any future events. At the Walrus, we really believe that trustworthy journalism in this time is an essential service. And with your support, we can continue to provide fact-checked, thought-provoking journalism that Canadians can rely on. So if you enjoyed this free event, please consider making a donation. Just go to our website at thewalrus.ca, click on donate, and all gifts of $20 or more will receive a charitable tax receipt. Thank you to Guy Cormier and everyone at Desjardins Group for making this conversation possible and our long-standing partnership together. Thank you to our annual sponsors as well, Inspire, Labatt Breweries of Canada, Air Canada, Shaw, and our newest annual sponsor, Facebook Canada. Community is so important in these COVID times, and each one of you is part of the Walrus community. Thank you. Merci, miigwech. Have a great night.